Let me tell you a story. In 1993, a low-budget film adaptation of one of the most popular comic book superhero groups was made, the Fantastic Four. And when I say this was a low-budget film, I truly mean that Constantine Films had a shoestring budget of $1 million. But even with that said, the cast and crew put their heart into making the best Fantastic Four movie that they could. Yes, it was cheesy, and yes, it was corny, but they did as good of a job that they could, and to me, the movie's still a fun time. But then, the plug was pulled. The film was finished, but it was never released or distributed in any way. Eventually, almost impossibly, the movie would be available to the general public, almost entirely through bootleg copies. I would hear over the years that many considered the Corman film to be the closest adaptation to the comic book.
I had such a unbearable hatred for you, Lee, for turning me into this. Look at it!
Unfortunately, the versions to follow never seemed to capture the heart of this Marvel flagship family, nor did the business Marvel expected. It was the start of a downward spiral for Fantastic Four film adaptations. Over the years, there would be more Fantastic Four films. One in 2005, a sequel to it in 2007, and a gritty reboot of it in 2015. Every single one of them, in one way or another, whether it was story or even just its tone, was a failure. And to me, that was really sad, because the Fantastic Four were really special to me. Now, I may not have read many Fantastic Four comics, but ever since I found out about that very first film that was made, I wanted Marvel's first family to be successful on the big screen so badly. But I wasn't a comics fan. Heck, I wasn't even born when the first low-budget film was made. So why was the Fantastic Four important to me? The actor who played the Human Torch in that unreleased film is my dad.
I've been wanting to blow up that destructor way since I was a kid, huh? Flame on!
Now, my dad wasn't a big-name actor or anything like that. Sure, Jay Underwood was in a few well-known 80s films like Uncle Buck, Not Quite Human, and even a single episode of Star Trek Voyager, but he wasn't super famous. But this movie was something that he and the rest of the cast hoped would be their big break. And it never came out. And now Dad isn't an actor anymore, but that's okay. He soon became a pastor, and he's currently the head of our local church down here in Burbank, doing what he loves, preaching the Bible, and even bringing his acting experience behind the pulpit. But I bring him up to show why the Fantastic Four is important to me. Comics have always been hard for me to get into, just because of their long history, and trying to figure out where to start reading. But despite that, I've always loved the Fantastic Four from what I did know about them, both from my own research and even just the films in general. Call it bias or whatever you want to, but when I finally heard that Marvel Studios was making a Fantastic Four movie in their cinematic universe, I wanted this movie to be good. I needed this movie to be good. And as of the making of this video, I have been blessed to see this movie 3 times. And I can firmly say that this film is absolutely fantastic.
Say that again?
No.
Anything I say about the movie beyond this point will not include spoilers. This isn't necessarily a review, it's just my current thoughts on the film as a whole. First off, one of my favorite things about this film is the art direction. Now, this has been said about the film ever since that first trailer by virtually everybody on the internet, but the retro-futuristic 1960s feel of this world is absolutely beautiful to look at. It definitely carries the space-age vibe of the time period, and that decade itself carried a kind of hopefulness, when people were only just beginning to believe that they could literally reach the stars. You can 100% feel that a lot in this film. It's fun to see this as a period piece, and this does what the multiverse saga should have been doing from the start. Making entirely new worlds for new characters, instead of just having one where everything is just the opposite. Looking at you, Doctor Strange. Matt Shakman, the director of this film, is a master at world building with this kind of aesthetic. He was also the director of the WandaVision show, which had a similar feeling of aesthetics and world building, and interestingly enough, so did Loki, and both are largely considered some of the best projects that Marvel Studios had put out for Phase 4 and 5. Another of the things that I really love about this movie is the musical score. Michael Giacchino really knocked it out of the park with the retro-futuristic pieces like the main theme, and even more haunting pieces that leave you with an overwhelming feeling of dread, like with Galactus and the Silver Surfer's Suite. It's just a great soundtrack. The main cast absolutely nails it. Pedro Pascal is a great Reed Richards who is trying his best to solve everything he can. Vanessa Kirby is a wonderful Sue Storm who shows both an emotional kindness and even an emotional resolve that I usually feel is tricky for other actors to nail down. Eben Moss-Bachrach plays a fun Ben Grimm who does well at playing the hulking thing with a heart of gold underneath it all, acting as a tether for the other members of the team. I kind of wish they gave his character a bit more to do in the movie, but for what we got, he's always a fun time when on screen. Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm is probably one of my favorite characters in the movie, and no, it's not because of my prior bias towards the Human Torch in general. Actually, what they do with him in the movie is really cool, and shows Johnny Storm as more than the cool, charismatic hot rod of a character than most people generally know him as. One of my favorite dynamics in this movie is between Ben and Johnny, and the two of them act a lot more like brothers than anything else, supporting each other one moment while making jabs the next.
What time is it, Ben?
No.
What time is it, Ben?
No, Johnny.
Say it!
I don't wanna!
Say it!
It's clobbering time!
Another really surprising addition to this movie that I wasn't expecting was Herbie. Now, I knew that Herbie appeared in the comics, but I didn't really know that much about him, so I wasn't really having any kind of expectations for this character. But he's just so fun every time he's on screen. He's not necessarily the unsung hero of this movie, but he's the one part that you really don't expect but just elevates the entire performance of everyone there. He's just so fun and so funny, and I honestly really love him. Lastly, there's Julia Garner as the Silver Surfer and Ralph Ineson as Galactus, and can I just say that the portrayal of both characters is done masterfully. The mysteriousness of the Surfer was shown really well here, and after seeing the movie, I personally think that using Shala Bal instead of Norton Rad works in the movie's favor. But you'll just have to see it yourself to know what I mean. And then there's Galactus. Let me just say that this portrayal of one of the biggest threats in Marvel Comics history is easily one of the most fascinating and intimidating villains in the entire MCU Rogues Gallery. Again, I won't spoil anything, but the moment he's introduced, his presence hangs over the entire film like a dark cloud, and his approach is always at the back of your mind. Not as a simple villain, but as a terrifying force of nature. He isn't intentionally evil, he just is. You can't reason with a hurricane. All you can do is try everything you can to outlast it. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the story. Well, I say talk, but anything I say could potentially spoil one of my favorite stories and conflicts in the MCU. So, let me just say this. The core story and conflict may or may not be relatively obvious, but the way that the conflict influences and changes the characters is something that I found myself invested in from start to finish. This is very much a character-based story, and it focuses a lot more on the familial aspect of the Fantastic Four, arguably more than any previous film adaptation before it. It's just a really good movie. But with all of that said, there's two reasons why I would say this film is the most important MCU film to me personally. Now, I recently graduated from film school about 3 years ago, and I've been trying to find work in the industry ever since. But for those who don't know, the film industry has been in a bit of a slump the past few years, and it's really, really hard to get any kind of work. Even more than it normally is, considering how competitive the industry is. Since my dad was the Human Torch in the unreleased Corman movie, once I heard that Marvel Studios had finally picked up the Fantastic Four film rights, I always joked to him that maybe one day Marvel will call him in to cameo and then I could beg the company for a job. And then, that's exactly what happened. I won't go into the details, but needless to say, I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when my dad got the call from Marvel Studios asking him and the rest of the original Fantastic Four to cameo in First Steps. I was so excited and proud of him. It felt like Marvel would never actually acknowledge the original unreleased film, considering how much they tried to distance themselves from it. All that mattered in that moment was how happy I was for Dad, and I didn't need anything else. And then, to my surprise, I was able to get a job for a few days on that set as a production assistant because of Dad. This wasn't necessarily my first job, but it was my first big job on this kind of film set. Even if it was only for a few days, I was so incredibly thankful to not only be a part of a movie like this, but to be a part of a movie that, in a strange way, was the bookend to my dad's connection to that original unreleased movie. Not only that, but Dad was invited to the world premiere of the film, and I was blessed enough to be his +1. Just being there was something I had never expected in a million years, and not only was it a ton of fun, but seeing Dad there with the rest of the original 4, having fun, meeting the new cast, and even meeting the fans that came for the film, I was really proud of him. Their cameo is only a few seconds long, but considering how long they've been waiting for this, I think a few seconds is more than enough. After 30 years, not only my dad, but the rest of that original team of 4 fantastic heroes were finally, officially acknowledged. And I was able to work alongside him on what is now probably my favorite Marvel movie. That is why the Fantastic Four: First Steps is the most important MCU movie for me.